It's Gavin here, the DiAthlete, and I'm with Elizabeth Rowley from T1 International. And we're going to ask Elizabeth about her story living with type 1 diabetes and what T1 International is all about. So firstly, how are you doing, Liz? Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year. Great to be here. Thanks for chatting with me.
No problem. So yeah, getting started on your life with type 1 diabetes. I know you do a lot all around the world. And I'm going to start with the more personal side of you. So you were diagnosed, I guess, quite young as a toddler, right?
Yeah, I was 4 years old.
4 years old. So I guess not just saying that you should remember when you were 4. I would say, how was those early years? What do you recall about those early years growing up with type 1 diabetes?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I kind of don't remember life before diabetes, so it's pretty interesting. Back when I was diagnosed, it was 1992 in the US, and they kept you in the hospital for a week. So it was a traumatic experience for me. And yeah, it was just really different than the way they do things now. Everything, at least in the UK and the US, is really advanced in that most people, from what I understand, aren't even hospitalized. So quite a different experience, and just really remember just being quite scared. And, you know, I was so young, it was hard to really understand what was happening. But then I just kind of got used to eating certain things and counting and injecting. And I think in a way it made me kind of a fearful child, but obviously I got over that and I have been able to live a happy life with it, but quite different than I think people's experience nowadays, for some people anyway.
Yeah, I guess a different experience is the fact that you grew up in the United States and now you live in the UK as well. So how old were you when you decided, you know what, I'm coming over to the UK, and what are the differences between the US healthcare that you experienced growing up and the UK one over here?
Yeah, I was in my early to mid 20s and I came over to study to do my master's degree, and really was surprised and quite thrilled by the UK system. I grew up in a system that had all the latest technology and tools and good quality healthcare, but the costs for me were very, very expensive. So to come over to the UK, and even as a student, as someone who's in the UK for at least 6 months, you get to be part of the healthcare system here. So I just remember going to the pharmacy and picking up my insulin and supplies and being kind of in shock. And even though I knew that the national healthcare system covers the cost of insulin and supplies for people with diabetes, it was still quite shocking and amazing to me to walk out of the pharmacy with everything I needed and not have to pay extra or pay more for that. So that's the biggest thing for me, I think, is just that the UK and other countries that we know of see this as kind of a human right. You should have access to this. We didn't do anything to choose type 1 diabetes, but we should have access to the things we need. Whereas in the United States, it's a very different system. It's a very complicated system, and people have to pay a lot for their care.
Yeah, and that's fundamentally what T1 International is all about as well, in less fortunate countries as well. So I guess you've come over here, you've experienced what the NHS system's like, living with diabetes at least. And so tell us a bit about, firstly, what is T1 International and what's the aims of the charity?
Yeah, so exactly as you say, I think it was partly sort of that transition and that gratitude I felt being a part of the UK healthcare system that made me want to do something about the lack of access around the world, not only in my home country, the US, but in the rest of the world. So I have a background in international studies and international development. That's what my master's degree was in. And I was always kind of overwhelmed by all the problems in the world, but specifically eventually realized this is something I know a lot about, and I know about it personally, and I'm learning about it around the world, so I can focus my efforts in making a change in this specific area. And that's kind of T1 International started as a blog to gather information about life with diabetes around the world and what's being done in some of the situations where access to healthcare isn't very strong. And what I actually found was there isn't a whole lot being done, and there isn't a lot of information out there, at least back when I started T1 International in 2013. And just the more I collected information, the more I connected with people, I started to learn more about the issues and realize, okay, there's a real gap here in, supporting people to find sustainable changes. So that's what T1 International is all about, really. We advocate for and with people with type 1 diabetes to make sustainable change in their home country, specifically around issues with access to insulin, but also test strips, access to education, all those things that people need to have a full life. And we empower advocates in their home country to do grassroots advocacy, but then we also work on higher levels to advocate, with the bigger NGOs. We input into consultations in the WHO and try to push for emergency care for people with diabetes. So we work on a lot of different levels, but it is all about advocacy and sustainable change. You're muted. There we go.
Hello, there I am. So I think that's I think it's essential that those things happen, and fair play for doing it and putting yourself out there, and you're a big voice around the world. And you mentioned two sides there, really. One, the online side where you started as a blogger, and two, the other side, now you're out there, grassroots as a charity, building advocates of the future in many ways. So firstly, looking on that online campaigning, I guess you had the advantage because you were active online blogging to start with.
Yeah.
And things like Insulin for All has been quite very successful for T1 International. Every year, lots of people get involved, supporting that hashtag. So can you tell us a bit about what that campaign is about and how it goes around the world?
Yeah. So a couple of years ago, we started using, as you said, the hashtag Insulin for All. It's on my T-shirt here as well. And that's really kind of a chance to get the word out there about these issues that we've been talking about. I know DiAthlete's really involved with kind of global diabetes as well. And the Insulin for All campaign serves a few purposes. One, to get people, especially people with diabetes, but people without as well, to think about what would it be like to live somewhere else and to not have the access that I have, or to struggle with certain things. So just to get people thinking, because I think type 1s can be a very internal condition. You're managing yourself all the time. You're focusing on your own health. It can be harder to think outside of yourself. So it's to get that going. And it's also really to bring the global community together under this one banner of, we can all agree that people with type 1 diabetes and type 2 as well who need insulin should have access. They should have access to insulin, test strips, all the things that they need. So it's called Insulin for All, but it does kind of encompass this wider, supplies, care aspect. And it's just to spark that engagement and to show that we're a united voice and a community.
Yep, which is, again, it's essential. And I think you're doing a great job making that happen, and lots of people getting involved as well, which is important when it shows the work is counting for something.
Exactly.
So and obviously it takes a lot of funds to kind of raise and to make a difference as well. So that is one thing I'm going to ask you about here is fundraising. I know that you're turning 30 pretty soon, and you're trying to raise some money. Instead of getting birthday presents, you want to raise money for that, which shows your dedication. And could you tell us a bit about some of the fundraising plans and agendas you have for 2018?
Yeah, definitely. So, our funding comes, we don't accept funding from pharmaceutical companies. We want to be able to speak out and be independent. So our funding comes from trusts and foundations in the UK, as well as just individual donors. So as you say, I'm doing some fundraising myself, and we have a lot of people who fundraise for us, whether that's running marathons or giving up coffee for a week or those kind of things. So it's great to see the community getting behind this. And those funds go really towards all aspects of our work. But this year we're really excited because a few of our highlights are we're continuing our online training of advocates. We have advocates in all parts of the world. So when we can't go to them physically, we're able to still connect online and sort of offer a strategy and planning process with them about the things that they want to change and provide ongoing support with our T1 International Advocacy Toolkit. So we'll be doing more of that. And we also hope to get enough funds raised to do an in-person training session. So you and I, Gavin, of course, went to Uganda last year. We got to tag on to an amazing camp that was put on by the Sonia Nabeda Foundation. And so what T1 International hopes to do is still work really closely with local partners around the world, but to be able to provide maybe a full day or 2-day workshop where we've got perhaps 20 advocates in the room, and we're doing this training in a more in-depth way. So at the camp in Uganda, we had some spare hours here and there, and we were able to do some great training. But we want to, really get people invested and give them all the tools that they need. So we're looking to do kind of a T1 International led, as I say, with local partners workshop. So that's another aim that we have, if we can get the funds to do that. And we'll be carrying out our 2018 insulin and supply survey to get data about what people have to pay out of their pockets. And so, yeah, all that needs funds. We need manpower to do it, and we'll keep aspiring to raise as much as possible and spread the word.
Definitely needed, and I think you're going to get there. I think you're already well on the way to achieving these things. You're showing it, and you've been out there as well. So not only is it your online stuff, not only that you have advocates around the world actually take part, that you personally have actually met other people from around the world face to face with, like Uganda last year where we were.
Yeah.
So I guess for the people listening, how is type 1 diabetes? Because people probably haven't actually known about it until, if you don't live in another country or experience that, if you're born here in the UK or in the US, wherever, you're used to that healthcare system, and it's a challenge enough perhaps to live and deal with that every day. So your mind doesn't actually think, what about somebody in some part of Africa or a less fortunate country? So let's say someone gets diagnosed with type 1 diabetes in some of the places you've been, like Uganda or Kenya. What are they likely to go through?
Yeah.
And how is that going to impact their lives and their futures? Could you give us a day in the life, or the experience that someone might have out there?
Yeah, I can try. I mean, that's a great question, and I know you've seen this and experienced some of it yourself as well. So feel free to add anything here, because it is so different depending on your location. But particularly in African countries, which you mentioned, I think in some places it's a huge challenge. When you're diagnosed, it depends. First of all, are you in a city or are you in a rural area? If you're in a city, you're going to have at least some access, hopefully, to maybe somebody who knows about diabetes and who can catch that you have diabetes. Oftentimes at diagnosis, people are thought to have malaria or are treated for a different condition entirely, which is a huge problem in itself. There's also a lack of diabetes specialists. So again, if you're in a city, you might be lucky enough to have that and to get some of the tools and education that you need. But understanding of type 1 in particular can be low even for healthcare personnel. And so if you're in a rural location, when you get that diagnosis, you're a lot less likely to have kind of support and information. But no matter where you are, really, obviously it's scary. It's scary for anyone in the world to be diagnosed and then realize that you're going to have to take injections for the rest of your life, that you're going to need to test your blood sugar. All of these things are just incredibly overwhelming, and it's overwhelming because the cost is a huge percentage of people's monthly income. Part of our survey that I mentioned, we did the same survey in 2016, and it shows, in some countries it's 80% of your monthly income, if not more, if you were to buy all the things that you need. And so a lot of people in Kenya or Uganda don't test their blood sugar every day. They test it once in a while whenever they go to the clinic. Or if they're lucky, they can test twice a day if they've got some form of support. So that in itself gives you a sense of, can you imagine not testing your blood sugar and not being able to appropriately manage your insulin dosage with your food? You're also probably taking an older version of insulin, maybe a mixed insulin that's more difficult for your body to handle. You should be keeping your diet the same, but in some countries, the diet is very carb heavy, or it varies quite dramatically. So you're taking this insulin every day and you're not able to match that up with the food you're eating. So there's just huge, enormous challenges. We know what a challenge it is living with type 1 day to day in our own country where we have everything that we need. So just trying to imagine not having those things, or having the extra burden of where am I going to get my insulin? How am I going to afford my insulin and my supplies? How am I going to be able to test regularly? All of those things. So, and I think, as I mentioned again, depending on where you live in each country, that social support element may or may not be there. And we've interacted with organizations that help create that social element, which is huge. And part of what you're doing, Gavin, with your League of Diathletes is also creating that link and that empowerment, which is vital. And so many people around the world don't have that. So hopefully what we're doing and what others are doing can help and give people at least that link to the diabetes world so they can join with others and talk through challenges and struggles and find ways to combat their challenging situations.
Yeah, and I would say the amazing thing is, from the experiences of going around the world, is actually, despite those key differences, you mentioned how people in less fortunate countries, they might have just mixed insulin and the lack of education and stuff that's available to them. Despite that, there is that great similarity where we are all linked together because of type 1 diabetes. I've meeting people, as you know, you have so much in common despite the differences in your healthcare systems.
Yeah.
What would you say on the fact that in the world today, you could say it's the most interesting time to have type 1 diabetes? If you look at the developments in the technologies, the CGMs, the pumps, whatever else is coming out next, it's kind of like the Apple's coming out. Every year there's a new one. You get an Apple iPhone, they've got 10 more.
Yeah.
And you're ready for a new one. It's kind of like that with the technology and diabetes. So in some ways, you could say it's the most interesting time to have diabetes when you see what is coming out. But how important is it? Actually, whilst this goes on in one part of the world, you look at the developing world where people are going without insulin, without test strips, unless they go to a clinic and stuff. How far behind is the rest of the world, and how important is it that actually we are all linked together?
Yeah, I think to me, like, that's what my biggest passion is, and in a way, one of my biggest frustrations. I mean, of course, it's all relative where you live. We want to know what's up and coming. We want to be on top of things. But I think that's a key in what both DiAthlete's doing and T1 International is doing, is just getting people to recognize, look, we're so lucky, and let's get people the basics first, because there's going to be so much more exciting and wonderful and amazing things that come when we get everybody up on the same level, on the same playing field. And it seems like a simple thing when insulin, for example, has been around almost 100 years. This month, January, it'll be 98 years since insulin was first used. And so something like that, to me, it's just kind of outrageous that so much money is being put towards some of these technologies, which are wonderful, and I know they improve lives, but why isn't there more effort to get these sort of basic things built up? And hopefully the bigger community we build, as you say, we can change that on some level.
Definitely. And finally, I think we kind of already answered this, but to be honest, what would your message be to the rest of the world living with type 1 diabetes?
Yeah, good question. So I think, for me, the work that I do and the sort of global perspective has just helped me to be a much more grateful person. I think diabetes sucks to live with. That's the reality. But it really helps me. I know different things help different people, but just for me personally, just to think this is a shit diabetes day, to be honest, if I can say that. And at least I still have the things that I need. At least I'm not stressed and worried. And, again, that attitude doesn't help everyone. But for me, it's just knowing what I know and seeing what I see. I can't be too negative about my own diabetes, because I'm so privileged compared to so many, just out of sheer dumb luck. So I think my message would just be to sort of be conscious of that as much as you can. People who are just thinking about this for the first time, or people who know about it. I know it's hard to think about people in difficult situations, and it's easy to want to think, oh, I don't want to think about that. It's negative, it's sad. And I get that. But I think if you link up with groups like yours, Gavin, and with T1 International, you'll see that it's hard to face some of that, but there's a lot of hope involved, and there's a lot of incredible people and stories and things that are going to make you excited about how much better things can be and how much good things are, how good things are in some places. So it's, you know, it's a two-sided coin, but just be conscious and engage with it as and when you can, I think.
Brilliant. Thank you, Liz. And, you know, good luck with everything you're doing in 2018 and with your birthday. Happy birthday for that.
Thank you.
Everybody listening, you can follow T1 International on all the social media, social networking streams, and of course, Insulin for All, the hashtag. Find it out there.
Great. Thank you so much.
Still on there?